Hello there. This is a recorded tutorial looking at professional codes of ethics and thinking about how helpful these are for teachers. I'm going to begin by explaining why I think teaching is ethical. And I think that because it's to do with people. So Morwenna Griffiths argues that it's what she calls a relational practice. I like that quote that I've chosen to put on the slide, how it's embodied, played out in specific socio-cultural contexts. That could be my context, it's to do with people over here in England, in Hong Kong. It's also to do with people and how they interact and having good ways of interacting. That's, I guess, what we think about as being ethical, as opposed to unhelpful, difficult, awkward ways of interacting as human beings. And some of those we might say were non-ethical or unethical if we're really uncomfortable. We think there's something bad about them. One of the things I think which is really exciting and as well as challenging about teaching is that you never know from one day to the next what the ethical challenges are that you're going to face. Each day is a new day in teaching, and it might be that you get things happen to you which are a version of something that's happened before, but even so, there can be real surprises, and you have to be constantly aware, I think, in the moment about how to react well to the things that happen to you. I mean, I guess to some extent that's what human life is like. But when you're a teacher in a position of responsibility and you've got 30, 35 young people for whom you're responsible, that's a big challenge. That's why I'm always hugely impressed by teachers. I don't think we should ever take good teachers for granted. So those sorts of ethical decisions that teachers might have to make could be seemingly very small. How do I decide who gets to have the certain resources first compared with other people? How do I share things out? How do we make things fair? That's may seem like a trivial question, but actually it's a really quite fundamental ethical and moral question. Then other things that people might have to face, and I think you've been looking at Moira Levinson's work, where she raises some quite big fundamental political issues that teachers and school leaders have to encounter. So all sorts of things that make teaching ethical. And that's one of the reasons why countries, jurisdictions around the world try to introduce codes for ethics to try and make this complex, challenging, ethical landscape a little easier to navigate. So the purpose of an ethical code is to give you some guidance about principles, about how to act. They're very different. They change over time and also place. I've given you an example on the slide of some very old-fashioned rules for teachers. I do hope that nowhere in the world does it say now you will not loiter downtown in ice cream stores, number 4, because I like loitering in ice cream stores. I think that's a terrible thing to tell people they can't do anymore. And also, you may not smoke cigarettes. Well, I don't smoke cigarettes anyway because they're not healthy, but should employers, should governments be able to tell teachers that they can't smoke if they don't want to? That does seem a little bit bizarre in the 21st century. So things change over time. And rules can also change over place, and we're going to see that in a minute when we look at 3 different examples of ethical statements around the world. I think Todd captures this idea quite nicely when she says that lists like this or statements like this, codes of conduct, capture values that I guess a lot of people agree around. Not everybody, as we'll come to in a minute, but they kind of capture what lots of people in a particular context generally think as economically as possible in a statement like this. So I said we were going to look at examples of ethical standards in 3 places. Well, Hong Kong, obviously, we should look at that. And then I'm working on a project at the moment, as we explained in the information for this unit, looking not just at England, my own country, but South Africa and codes of practice that South African teachers have. So I want to just dip in very briefly to those 3 different contexts and have a little look at some of the ethical standards in those 3 places, so we can have a kind of comparison exercise, but also see how the 3 statements are different in the way that they're presented and in the content of